Okay, well, let's get started. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's presentation, where we're going to hear a little bit about the startup ecosystem in Ohio and Northeast Ohio in particular. I'd like to welcome the North Coast Venture team to this evening. We have four representatives tonight, and they're going to handle a Q&A session, some prepared questions, but plenty of time as well to ask your questions. But just a few comments before I introduce everybody. I mean, I'm a member of North Coast Ventures, a member of Seed Fund 3, as well as the Acceleration Fund 2. And I guess from personal experience, I can say it's been a tremendous amount of fun for me. I've learned a lot about how these companies get started, learned about strategy, marketing, go-to-market, and so on. So it's been extremely fulfilling for me. And so that's how I've got involved with them. And that's why I'm so excited that they're here tonight to tell us about what's going on in this space in Northeast Ohio. So with that, I just want to introduce the panelists. First off, we have Clay Rankin, who many of you know, obviously a member of the HBS Club, and has been managing director of North Coast Ventures since 2006. He's also on the board of the National Angel Capital Association, and I'm sure he'll say a few things about that. But that's been great in terms of again, highlighting the great things that are going on here in Northeast Ohio. Has had a lot of roles in private industry, Sycamore Partners, Bruning Paint Company, Laurel Industries, Cleveland Twist Drill, XMR Laser Systems, and also with McKinsey and Company. Bachelor's degree from Yale and an MBA from Harvard, so hence the membership in the club. So welcome, Clay. The next, we have Todd Fetterman, who's the managing director of North Coast Ventures, also since 2006. So a long history with the group. Prior to North Coast, Todd served as a technology strategy consultant for Diamond Cluster and AOL, and then he launched a consumer packaged goods company called One with Nature. He has a bachelor's degree from Kent State and MBA from Duke University. The third panelist is actually one of the portfolio company CEOs, and one of the more interesting and quickly accelerating companies based here in Cleveland. And that's Andrew Kanya, the CEO of Remesh, which was founded in 2014 with the mission of helping us understand one another by instantly understanding what's going on with the population. Andrew's a physicist and has spent the last decade applying AI and machine learning algorithms to a wide range of problems, from material science and biosensing to peacekeeping with the United Nations. And so those are our three panelists, and they'll be fielding some prepared questions. And then, as I mentioned at the end, there'll be an opportunity for all of you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask your questions. And Daniel Luketic, also a director at North Coast Ventures, will be moderating tonight's discussion. He's been there since 2016, and previously he was a consultant to the BizDom Accelerator, which supported technology startups by creating connections to Dan Gilbert's extensive family of companies. Daniel's co-founded a couple of companies, Risk Management Technologies, a SaaS insurtech business, and ULobby, a crowdfunding platform. Daniel has a bachelor's degree from Mount Union. So again, welcome to the North Coast Ventures team, and really looking forward to an interesting program tonight. So thanks everyone for signing in. Daniel, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. We are all very excited to share our perspective on the startup environment in our region and in our state. And John encouraged us to start with sharing just a few slides and that will offer a very brief overview of who we are, hopefully just to give you a better idea of kind of what informs our perspective that we're going to offer up. Then I will moderate a panel discussion, as John mentioned, with our managing directors and Andrew, who does have the distinction of being one of our very favorite portfolio company CEOs. But as we kick things off, I do need to note SEC regulations don't allow us to engage in general solicitation. So this presentation is not a solicitation for investment. We would just like to share more information, again, about what we've done over the last 14 years, what we're doing today, what we're seeing with this high growth technology environment, and maybe share a little bit about what we think still needs to be done to help the region accomplish a larger vision as a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem. So with that, I'll just blaze through these slides quickly to give you a sense of who we are today. And starting here with the first slide, some of you may remember us or have known us as North Coast Angel Fund. At the beginning of this year, we officially rebranded to reflect the evolution of our organization, especially the evolution as it relates to the various funds that we now manage, and we'll share a little bit more about that here in a minute. Our sweet spot for investing is in highly scalable business-to-business software as a service ventures, especially where we have domain expertise within our membership and where we can leverage our network to make customer introductions. And speaking of networks, we have a tremendous network that we leverage of over 300 LPs that really include a who's who of Cleveland's movers and shakers. We also have a proven process for leveraging our network of LPs as well as our network of corporate partners to open doors on behalf of our portfolio companies. And we look at deals currently all over the nation, but our primary focus is on the Midwest. We run companies through a proven process of professionally managed screening and diligence. And we involve select members, LPs from our group with relevant expertise in those processes. We have generated 5 positive exits to date, and we will talk about some of them during our panel discussion. We feel there is definitely reason to be excited with so many additional high potential companies in the portfolio that we feel are really pointed in the right direction, like Remesh, ScriptDrop, and PerformX, just to name a few. And we will talk about these companies as well later on during the panel discussion. We focus on investing in brilliant, committed founders and founding teams. Again, we're going to hear from one of those individuals here later on. And we are currently investing out of 2 active funds. Our 4th seed fund, which invests in early stage startups, and we invest with an average of $250,000 average initial investment. And our 2nd acceleration fund, which invests slightly lighter stage after companies have achieved product market fit and begun to show rapid growth. And that fund's initial average investment is $500,000. And this is the team behind the fund. So you're going to get to hear from Todd and Clay, Ann, our CFO, and Lean, our investment associate, round out the team today. And we're actually getting ready to welcome a new team member this coming Monday. It's going to round out our team, so we're growing. And with that, I'm going to stop this share. With that, let's dive into the panel discussion. As we do. As John mentioned, we invite you to submit questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom. We're going to just collect those and let those sit there, and then we'll answer them at the end and should have plenty of time to be able to answer those questions. As we get started here, I'm also going to make a promise to our panelists. If a fly happens to land on your head during this discussion, I am going to pay you the courtesy of letting you know so you can swat it away. Okay, everyone? So I just wanted to get that out of the way right here at the start. But with that, let's dive in. So, Clay, let's start with you. It's been 14 years since North Coast was born, and I've got kind of 2 questions to start us off, which are: why did you think it was important to build a group, and what have you seen change over these last 14 years? And you might want to come out from mute. I think you might have been muted. Yep.
So thank you, Daniel, and thank you for the protection you're going to offer me against the bugs that might arrive. But hello, everybody, and it's good to be with you tonight. I think I would like to answer Daniel's first question about why I thought it was important to put a group together 14 years ago. I had been investing in startups for about 9 years before North Coast. And I really saw firsthand how difficult it was for entrepreneurs to find capital in Northeast Ohio. There was certainly no identifiable place to go if you were an entrepreneur that wasn't connected to the few people who were interested in early stage investing here in our region. They were really stuck, and many were frankly leaving for the coast. So along with an organization that you've probably heard of called Jumpstart, we wanted to foster a much more vibrant early stage investment ecosystem that would support entrepreneurs and generate greater deal flow for the region. Now, 60 to 70% of angel groups nationally are simply networks or clubs of individual investors. And I felt that we should have a different structure. And we, based on a simulation done by the Angel Capital Association, was determined that a portfolio of roughly 15 to 20 companies could help mitigate the risk of these early stage investments. And I didn't feel that most individuals had the time or inclination to build a portfolio of that size. So I set up North Coast with a fund structure and an organization that could screen really large numbers of companies and distill them down to now ultimately create a portfolio of investments for our members. The fund concept also seemed particularly important given that 50 to 60% of early stage investments typically get written off. So now coming to Daniel's second question, which is sort of what's changed over the last 14 years. Quite a bit. When we started North Coast, it was really the beginning of an entrepreneurial ecosystem in this region. Under then Governor Taft, the Third Frontier program was created to provide matching capital to support or supplement our members' private capital. And that program provided meaningful incentive that really helped us attract investors to North Coast. And that program continued under the Strickland administration, but effectively came to an end under the Kasich administration and has not been picked up by Governor DeWine. So the Third Frontier program was also supplemented by the Ohio Technology Investment Tax Credit. And that also helped us attract investors at the time, but unfortunately, that program also went away under the Kasich administration. But as Daniel mentioned earlier, now that we're on our sixth fund and have over 300 members today across all of the funds, we do believe that this puts us probably in the top 5 of angel groups nationally in terms of membership size. And today, I would say we are visible to entrepreneurs. We've invested in 59 companies, and I think we've got a little over 60 million that has been invested coming from our funds and through our members' sidecar investments. But I would also say that our ecosystem is still very young and developing. I think it'll probably take another 10 to 15 years to fully mature. But it's a very exciting and dynamic time. I think that offers a lot of promise for Northeast Ohio.
Great. Thank you, Clay. Todd, we'll jump over to you. So, you've been with Clay for every step of that 14-year journey so far, and maybe you can bring some of what Clay just mentioned to life by diving into a little bit more detail around your experience with a few particular portfolio companies like an OnShift or a SureX or a Hology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's come to life across 60 different companies, several of which, like the ones you mentioned, Daniel, have come full circle. A company like OnShift, which we funded when they had 5 people, now has over 250 people. We led OnShift's first round, which was $1 million seed round. They went on to raise multiple rounds from institutional venture capital funds. Their most recent round was from a private equity group, and it allowed the company to buy out the early investors, which is always nice for early investors to see an exit. And it also allowed the company to make the first of what will be several different acquisitions to continue to build out over time. It's been a nice experience for us because we've been able to participate in multiple rounds, some of those through our seed fund and some of those through the acceleration fund when companies get a bit more mature. And this maturing process is part of the fun, I think, as an early stage investor, not just because of the success that you can see with any one company, but because it often leads to a new generation of startups. Several different startups have been launched by OnShift alumni. These are product people, software people, marketing people who've learned what it takes to be part of a high growth company by being part of a high growth company at OnShift. And then they left, went on, and launched their own companies. One example is TPA Stream in Cleveland, which we invested in. And they're now up to 15 people and are just past $1 million in recurring revenue. It's early in their life cycle, but this is part of the continuum that we're hopeful to see much more of across the portfolio.
Thanks, Todd. Andrew, so Todd just talked about a few companies that received investment from our early seed funds. Remesh received investment from our third seed fund. Again, I think that was in 2017. Can you give everyone just a quick 2-minute high-level overview of Remesh, maybe include a little bit about what the company does and what's happened over these last 3 years since we invested?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we started out initially focused on understanding populations in conflict zones. And so we spent about 2 years obsessed with building the best way in the world to understand a population of people with the stakes of lives on the line and at the speed of geopolitical conflict. Thankfully, or to the happiness of our investors, about 4 years ago, we launched an enterprise product. And what we did was found a way to replace the traditional approaches to understanding people from focus groups to surveys with a new paradigm that allows us to scale the dynamics and depth and speed of just one-on-one conversation to an entire population of people. We use a whole bunch of AI to make this all work. And we've been in business now, or had a business, I should say, for about 4 years. With North, I think we were 5 people. At that time, we moved from Cleveland to Brooklyn. We were in a crappy warehouse in Brooklyn, and we were just getting our very first customers. So I think we had maybe 5, 10, enough on a piece of hand, and maybe a couple $100,000 in sales. Since then, we've now grown to about 80 people, and annualized sales this quarter is probably about 15 million. And so we had quite a journey and hired a lot of great people, both in Cleveland and outside of it, and are excited for what's going to happen next.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Clay, we'll swing back around to you. So, some of the best evidence of a healthy early stage ecosystem involves exits, and which hopefully will generate the type of flywheel effect that I think Todd was referring to a little bit between OnShift and TPA Stream and that dynamic. So now we've heard about a few Ohio-based companies in our portfolio that have had an exit. Let me just add a few other companies to that list. These are high growth technology companies that were built in Ohio. Companies like Atoa Technologies that was acquired by Oracle, or Explorus, which was acquired by IBM, or Cardio Insight acquired by Medtronic, or MacroPoint that was acquired by Descartes. So, can you tell us, adding those into the mix, about the impact that those types of exits have on the region? Specifically, are we starting to see this flywheel effect?
Daniel, I do think we are beginning to see that effect. Todd mentioned OnShift having spawned TPA Stream. Jacob Sheridan, the CEO, is the individual who had launched that company. And then you mentioned TOA. TOA's CEO was Yuval Brisker, and Yuval went on to start Meizu afterwards. And you talked about Explorus. And Charlie Lockheed, one of the co-founders of Explorus, has gone on to start Actual, which is now a portfolio company of North Coast. And you mentioned Cardio Insight. Sharu Ramanathan has started Vital Exchange. And I think you mentioned Proformex, MacroPoint spun out or sold, and Proformex was started by Chris Beck. So I think we are beginning to see this flywheel effect, but it's still early. As I mentioned before, it's an ecosystem that's still maturing. We need many more exits. And frankly, we need to do a better job of getting the word out to entrepreneurs on the coasts that Northeast Ohio is a pretty great place to build a business. And Andrew, it's really nice to see what you're doing to come back here.
Great. Thanks, Clay. And Todd, maybe just building on that, I'll add a few other successful high growth companies to the list. And these are some with maybe a more recent wins, like an Overdrive that was acquired by Rakuten, or like a Scout RFP acquired by Workday, or most recently, I think there's been some news around Within3. So could you tell us a little bit more about these companies? My question for you is should we be expecting news like this with more regularity?
Yeah, I would really like to think so. I think to Clay's point, we need to stuff the pipeline, right? These companies don't just pop in isolation. For there to be 3 good exits in a year or 10 good exits in a year, we're going to have to look at hundreds and hundreds of companies, invest in smaller subsets, and then help them ultimately be successful. And North Coast is just one small part of this ecosystem. We're part of a much larger ecosystem. And it's important for us to encourage success from all parts of that ecosystem and for that ecosystem to support us. You mentioned Overdrive, which is a company that's probably been around for 20 years, has several hundred people. My kids use their library products as part of Shaker Schools and how they access information. This is a global company which has now gone through several exits and is building a whole series of people with talent there to continue to grow these companies. You also mentioned Within3, which be remiss to not mention that the initial founder, CEO, and current director, Jim Bennett, is also a Harvard alum. That's a terrific story. I think it just came out last week that they raised $100 million from Insight Venture Partners. And that company has a lot of growth ahead of them. They're really just getting started. So sometimes it seems like, it's the end. In reality, these are companies that we really hope will continue to contribute to the ecosystem. And I do think we can expect more good news, but it will only happen over time if we continue to fund great entrepreneurs at the earliest stages. And there's no question that even the best founders, the very best founders, will have challenges raising early stage money and capital from non-regional sources. That there's no such thing as pre-seed and early seed investors on the coast that are looking for great companies here in Northeast Ohio or between the coasts. It has to be an activity that we need to support, that we identify the best prospects and help them reach a level where they can eventually attract more capital from the coasts and continue to grow.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. Andrew, Clay referenced, how encouraging it is to hear about a decision like the one Remesh recently made to move back to Cleveland from New York. Tell us more about how you went about that decision. And you're on mute.
Admittedly, the plan was to come bring the company back to Cleveland all along. We left for many of the reasons I think were alluded to here, which is tough to get early stage capital here, and especially when you are for us, we were a business that had to build fundamentally new technology to solve a problem. So that meant that it was a high upfront capital cost with no promise of return soon. And that takes a certain type of risk profile. But as we built the company, the aim was bring it back to Cleveland once we kind of get it up and running and growing quickly. And we didn't know when that would be. Admittedly, probably we thought it would be 2023, 2024 when we really did it. And then COVID happened. And two things kind of converged there. The first was it forced us to, as a company, to initially go all remote. And we realized that we could become extremely efficient under that. The second was that it forced us to take a critical eye to, let's call it capital efficiency for our company, and start thinking more critically about how we spend our money wisely. And as we started to look at the levers that exists, we realized that one, this meant we no longer had to be in New York because remote made it not a requirement, and there's a lot of spend that happens on office space and things there. And two, there was a ton of talent that was already outside of New York and actually starting to migrate back to the Midwest. So I joke with Todd that we found this kind of like beautiful segment of humans, which are people who graduated from schools in Ohio, went on to work for the best companies, organizations, VC firms in the world on the coast. Then they turned 30 and decided to like have a family, and all of a sudden they're still awesome humans, but they feel a pull back home. And we found that those are really amazing people to hire. And so we decided this was perfect excuse or opportunity to start shifting our center of gravity to Cleveland. And so I think we feel fortunate that we got the company to a place now where not only is it viable, but it's a smart business decision. And I'm excited because from my perspective, I think a lot about the ability to convert labor that creates value for our company and for the world, and how much we can give back to the employees who create that in terms of happiness. And in New York, it takes a lot of money to buy that lifestyle and happiness. And in Cleveland, it's much more accessible. So I think we've now had some of lifelong New Yorkers, ACE level people, who have now moved to Ohio, traded their 1,000 square foot Manhattan apartments for 6,000 square foot homes, have a much better state of life and are creating higher output for the company. So I think it's win-win-win across the board for us. And I think in kind of the new world we live in, it's actually probably one of the most viable places to scale a business.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. Clay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about networks. So my question is, why is access to a network so important to an early stage venture? And also, just how does that process of opening doors look in practice as an early stage investor or as an early stage fund investor?
Well, I talked earlier about the size of our membership, and I do want to underscore why this network of members is important to the entrepreneurial community, particularly here in Northeast Ohio. Obviously, having enough investable dollars is important. So the bigger the fund, the more companies we can support, and that's substantive investment levels. But the network of members offers so much more to entrepreneurs, many of whom in Northeast Ohio are first-time entrepreneurs. I think our members can often bring both functional and industry experience. For example, many entrepreneurs have engineering backgrounds, but lack the financial, sales, or marketing experience that some of our members can bring. Importantly, I think our members can be a sounding board for management teams, sometimes in a board of director capacity, but being able to provide objective outside perspective on various business issues facing the CEO or a management team. And I think our members really can often open doors to companies in the region, thus helping these companies identify potential users of our portfolio companies' products and services. And I think lastly, the importance of the network is that it can provide a learning environment for members who are new to early stage investing. And many here in Northeast Ohio are new to that game. And they may feel uncomfortable going it alone. So it's just nice to be able to talk to others with similar interests. So you can tell I really do believe that the network can be so much more than just bringing investment dollars to the table.
Thank you, Clay. Todd, sticking with this topic of networks, maybe you can tie what we just heard from Clay back to a couple other exciting Ohio-based portfolio companies that we would encourage this group to keep an eye on. Companies like Performex and ScriptDrop. So maybe tell us a little bit more about those companies and how a group of investors like North Coast has been able to leverage our network to support them.
Yeah, and I might just add to Clay's point first on just why this network thing matters. Network is the one thing we can do better than anybody else in the world. We're not going to have more money than the coast. We're not going to have partners in our funds who have more exits. But we can assemble an engaged, functioning, active network in a way that I just haven't seen anyone else do. Active individual investors, corporate partners, and supporters that are engaged and willing to work on behalf of our companies. I think there's a lot of examples of us being willing to do things that our competitors, our investors in other parts of the country just aren't. Because we all know what the right questions to ask are. We don't necessarily know the answers, right? Because we're not subject matter experts across all the domains. So when we can leverage that 300-person network to get the right industry area, functional area, or part of startup expertise, it gives our companies an advantage. And our willingness to open doors on the introduction side is that next level. But that's something where I think in Cleveland, one of probably the most connected communities that I've been part of, and after living in DC, Baltimore, Atlanta, and Durham, I just haven't seen another community where you can basically get to anyone with one call, even if you don't have that. And to your question, Daniel, of how have we leveraged these networks, we've gotten into major New York brokerages and wirehouses for Performex through wealth managers in Cleveland that are part of our group or are paying attention. ScriptDrop has got in the door at the Cleveland Clinic because we opened that door. ScriptDrop is a company that does prescription delivery. Most of their customers are pharmacy chains, but who competes with pharmacy chains for pharmacy delivery? It's the actual hospital systems. The Cleveland Clinic and UH and Metro, they each have their own pharmacies. They want to and need to compete. So when we reach out and open the door, it's not that we're pushing something on them. We're opening a door and creating an opportunity for a conversation. None of these companies are going to buy something from one of our portfolio companies because we ask them to, but they'll absolutely take the meeting. They'll give the voice of customer, they'll give feedback, and if there's a good fit, they'll engage. And I think our willingness to do that and our willingness to be disciplined about only doing that in cases where we see real value for the company or the people in town here has preserved the goodwill so we can keep adding that value for our companies.
Great, thanks, Todd. Andrew, you've been on the receiving end of this network, and so please just share what your experience has been and why you see such kind of unique value in a Midwest-based investor in a network like ours, like North Coast.
Yeah, certainly. So I think one of the things that's important, I think, especially for companies of our stage, is optimization of aggregation of leverage, right? Leverage comes in the terms of capital, labor, and network, and information. And in New York, we were able, one of the first things we did was optimize for a network of people. And I think that was valuable and useful and helped us, go from the initial 0 to 1. But as you start meeting more and more people within your local network, there's a lot of overlap. And so, as we brought our first kind of big name investor on board with General Catalyst, that opened a lot of doors. And then we started bringing other people on board, in that in that New York City orbit, and even in the Boston orbit. And what we found is like mostly you all are connected to many of the same people. And so what's fascinating is as we engage deeper with Todd and everyone through the North Coast network, we realized these are almost 0% overlapping networks. And so it meant that the marginal value of engaging with a firm like North Coast was substantially higher than the marginal value of engaging with some other firm on the coast, all things else equal. So I think it's worth noting that we do almost every board meeting, we create a challenge for the members who are in the room. And they generally are our ways of peer pressuring the folks around us to do what we want them to. And usually it's getting them to open their Rolodex and spend some social capital to get us into conversations. And remarkably, Todd has won this probably 70 or 80% of the time we do it. And I'll say it's a combination of network orthogonality, the ability, I think, the nature of people in Ohio, to be frank, of like relationships built on trust, which means you can have conversations versus places on the coast where it's a lot more transactional. And then I'll say a piece of it is Todd's just a really good hustler. But I think all those things actually combine to make a quite potent value proposition. We're in the business where our customers, our average customer will do hundreds of thousands of dollars with us a year, and that means we pay quite a bit to go and land a customer. So if you can short circuit that entire process with one introduction, and you do that even 2 times a year, and that starts compounding with like 140% NDR or something, all of a sudden the amount of value that's been contributed to a company with relatively small amount of work from everyone involved is huge. So I'm a huge believer in value of network and try to be very strategic about building it.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Just one more question about networks, and it's for you, Clay. Ohio is, people may not realize, is currently very well represented on the National Angel Capital Association board. It was mentioned that you are on that board, as well as Tony Shipley is on that board. He's the managing director of Queen City Angels in Cincinnati. He actually serves as the current board chair. Maybe you could share a little more about that association and specifically the impact that it drives for our region.
Sure. The Angel Capital Association represents about 250 angel groups nationally. And I think those groups are comprised of about 14,000 individual investors. And we have a growth target to substantially increase that, probably double it in the next several years. But just to stand back for a minute and look at what the association is all about, because it does provide a number of support initiatives to the angel community. I would say historically, its primary mission has been to provide educational programs to sort of help raise the caliber of angel investing on a national level. It's important for all of us to remember that really angel investing per se is a very young activity. It really hasn't been going on for much more than about 20 years. So there's been a real effort to try and upgrade how we go about investing in these early companies. Closely behind the educational piece is that the Angel Capital Association has a very active public policy committee that works on legislation that benefits angel groups in such areas as the definition of an accredited investor and a variety of tax policies that impact how our investments are treated. And since early stage investment contributes in a very substantial way to job creation across the country, we've actually found that Congress and the SEC do tend to listen to us in a very constructive fashion. Another area that ACA is working on is in data collection to help us understand what's happening in the investment arena, the early stage investment arena nationally and regionally, and to really better understand what ultimately drives superior investment performance. And then lastly, the ACA is looking for ways to promote collaboration amongst angel groups and ensure that promising companies get the capital they need wherever they may be located. And you are right. Ohio has been well represented at the Angel Capital Association. You mentioned Tony Shipley, but John Houston, who ran a similar group to North Coast down in Columbus, the Ohio Tech Angels, is also a previous chair of the association. So I think we've been very lucky in Ohio to have good representation on the board, and it's a great group of board people.
Great, thanks, Clay. Well, Todd, you get the honor of the final kind of pre-packaged question here before we get into the Q&A. But I guess what we'll end this on is, a lot has changed over the last 5 to 10 years, as we've heard. There's still more work to be done. And so I guess I would just invite you to maybe get on the soapbox for a couple minutes. What do we need to do? What do we need more of?
Sure. And because of the SEC regulations you mentioned earlier, I'll get out the medium-sized soapbox. I always like to jump on the extra large, but I'll resist that temptation. And just say that there are infinitely more people in Northeast Ohio who can help accelerate our success as an entrepreneurial ecosystem every single day. And one of the simplest ways that can be done is by listening to the stories and storytelling, right? So every day somebody asks me what's new. And I can't tell you how many times I answer with a story about Remesh or a story about one of our portfolio companies. And everybody here tonight just met a world-class company founded in Cleveland that most people probably hadn't heard about before. And I think that is something worth talking about. A Cleveland-based company that went from 3 to 80 people in 3 years, that raised meaningful capital from a General Catalyst, a $1 billion venture capital fund, whose biggest customer is P&G, and other titans of consumer packaged good, but ones who we have to really work hard to open the door for. So we've helped here in Cleveland with companies like Key and PNC and Progressive. And we've opened those doors. It's been a terrific result. But as a world-class company that's really revolutionizing market research, there are thousands of other companies that we think we can be successful in opening those doors. So it would really be storytelling, making sure people open to these connections, making sure our ecosystem is just more culturally open to connecting and accelerating these companies, because we have so many of the raw ingredients that we need to be successful, and we just need to put them together. And it's going to take commitment from, I think, a broader group of people than has traditionally been involved in the investing ecosystem.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're gonna have time to get to all of our questions. If others have questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A. I've got 3 or 4 questions here that we'll dive into. Todd, maybe we'll stick with you. This first question from Bruce. Oh, sorry, Clay.
Daniel, I wondered if I could take on the first one from Bruce Taylor.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting one, and also has a little bit of challenge associated with it. And the question being, seems like the strategy is to get something going and then cash out, as opposed to building a Fortune 1000 company with prospects to be a Fortune 500 one. And the reality is that we are a fund that has a 10-year life. And so there is an endpoint to our investment. And when we look at the history, really very, very few companies end up going public. It's been a small minority of companies historically that have been able to do that. And I think it's the going public where you would see the best opportunity to create that large an organization that would get us in the Fortune 1000 to the Fortune 500. The vast majority of startup companies end up being acquired by a strategic investor that folds them into their operations and grow them from there. So, on the one hand, you got to get a return on investment, in a reasonable period of time. And then on the other, the chance of being able to do an IPO is pretty small.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Todd, you want to grab the next one? I see a couple friendly faces, names rather, in the crowd. This one's coming in from Tom Waltermeyer about how tough it is around pre-seed companies, right? What becomes before us, and they're struggling to create a proof of concept and early market tests. We had the innovation fund, but what's your outlook, Todd, for this critical part of the pipeline?
Yeah. I will answer that, and I'll just pause for one moment because Clay, I like how you characterize the challenge of companies that are large enough to potentially have an IPO. And I'd suggest that there is a middle ground, though, that there are technology businesses in Cleveland like Highland Software, MRI Software, OEC, which are all private equity funded, which are all very acquisitive. These companies all regularly buy other companies and grow, thousands of employees each. And that is absolutely a platform that will be appropriate for many of our portfolio companies. A business like Remesh, is there the makings of an IPO there? Time will tell. But even in the absence of that type of transaction, there can be a tremendous success for the entrepreneurial community, for the investor community, and just the broader region here. To Tom's question, supporting the pre-seed companies is a real challenge. So groups like North Coast are, despite our interest in the overall ecosystem, despite our wanting to be cheerleaders and supporters of all things entrepreneurship, we're a for-profit organization. So we are only writing checks in companies that we think have demonstrated enough traction and potential to get to the next level. And I think the types of companies that Tom is referring to here are companies that are pre-traction, pre-minimum viable product, and are still demonstrating things in the lab. We've been really fortunate to have the Innovation Fund in Cleveland for the last 10 years, to have an organization like Jumpstart over the last 10, 15 years. But it's going to take a different level of support and investors who are willing to get involved at that very early stage. And that's something that we're not really built to run and do. We'd love to see more of that kind of investment because it feeds us, but it's not really ours to run with.
Yeah, I'd love to add on to that as well, because I think that that pre-seed activity is something that we've often seen cultivated in accelerators in different parts of the country. And we frankly don't have much in the way of accelerators in Cleveland. We need more. It's something that needs to be addressed. We've had a couple in the past that have kind of slipped away from us. Dan Gilbert had one, as Daniel was part of. And the point is that those accelerators are very valuable in sort of filling the pipeline for the kinds of companies that we look at. And that's an area that I think needs to be worked on in our community.
Yeah, I'll just note here, we went through, our initial pre-seed funding came in Ohio, first through, I believe, Glide Innovation Fund. And then we went through Charlie Stack's Flash Starts Accelerator. And then we actually, in New York, went through TechStars Accelerator. So I can, firsthand the importance of those. And I think, from the flip side of it, it's just as the distribution of assets in your portfolio at the stage you guys are focused at North Coast are, you're not expecting 100% hit rate. You're expecting maybe 4x returns on 30, 40% of your companies. In the accelerators, the entire model is, massive amounts of companies, super early checks, and very small amounts of win, so that investing in the accelerator overall doesn't have quite the risk exposure of investing in just one startup. And so I think every person I've seen who does well in that pre-seed or seed stage happens in some combination of three things. Either one, they start with money, previous exit, or family, or they have rich individuals and networks. So in New York, that's part of how we were able to get up and going. Someone who would just write a 100K check without thinking too much of it and was willing to lose it, but wanted the upside, and accelerators. And so I think any solution that you might imagine, that the first one, you can't really pull that lever too much, except as the flywheel pumps that back in. And those, the second two, I think, are places where if there were something to push on to accelerate us, those two feel like the ones. Now, how to do that, I don't know. Hope to be contributing on one side of that eventually, but for now, yeah, just a pattern I've seen.
Great. Andrew, let's stick with you, because I see a question here that's
Sure.
targeted to you from Billy. He said he struggled to recruit the types of candidates that you were characterizing, where you were pushing that kind of cost of living angle, feeling it only goes so far. So his question is, what other messages have you found that resonated and that helped you recruit? Yeah.
To some degree, we've not found like shotgun messaging. It's a little bit of find the people and then optimize for individuals. Broadly, I would think it's not the cost of living no one's convinced by cost of living. They're convinced by the life that they're going to have. And I think that an important component of that is that some of that life is like you live in a home and you can breathe fresh air and things like that. But the other part of it is that you are still part of something that is big and meaningful in the world. And you are still embedded in a culture that has a certain dynamic to it. And so I think what we've had to prove ourselves on and continue to is get a best of both worlds, that in working for us here, you both can have a good life, but you will still contribute to a company and a mission that has a genuine ability to change how the world works. And you'll work with some of the best and brightest people in the world while doing that. And then you can hop in your car and go home to your comfy, awesome house and still have both of those things. And I think from the coast, there's a natural assumption that's baked in that if you go anywhere but the top 5 cities, that you're gonna not have the energy or the culture or kind of that magic that happens. And I think that we've one of the most important hires I think we made was a person who all they do is obsess and work on that. And I think that half of it is creating it, and the other half is then selling it, if you will, to the people who you're recruiting into the ecosystem or into your organization.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yep.
A couple more minutes here. Todd, do you want to take the next one here? I see it's asking about how has the potential investment flow and company formation changed under COVID? Actually, sorry, that one came in from John Shetzley. He sent me that via chat.
Okay. Yeah,
Tom Waldermeyers, you want to pick up on COVID?
Yeah, I'm happy to address COVID. I would say not as much as most people might imagine. And it's largely because we invest in B2B SaaS companies, number one. And number two, we've gotten a little lucky in that none of our B2B SaaS companies happen to be focused in sports, entertainment, or travel, places where you're going to get hurt no matter what. But in B2B SaaS, there tends to be more stability to recurring revenue, more stability around larger customers. And for a subset of these companies like Remesh, they just got more valuable in a COVID environment. So P&G doesn't get 10 people in a room to talk about diapers anymore, right? These focus groups are all having to happen online. ScriptDrop is a lot busier now with prescription delivery than they were prior to COVID. One of our companies, Wiser, which does web-based mentoring and onboarding for university students, is obviously in a very transformed place. And the reason is because the investment thesis behind many of our investments is betting on these secular trends, various types of disintermediation, digitization, changing workflows. And these are things that we know are happening. The question is, when are they going to happen? Disruption like COVID accelerates all of that. So in many cases for us, it brings a feature to us a lot more quickly than it would have otherwise, and does not dry up opportunities in many ways.
I might add on to that too, Daniel, that in our first fund, we had a broader focus than just software. And we were into medical devices, for example. And one of our portfolio companies, just to sort of give you a sense of how COVID has impacted here, they were in the middle of clinical trials and trying to enroll patients, and found that really ground to a halt as hospitals in the sort of February, March, April timeframe were much more focused on dealing with potential excess demand on their facility, and they just shut down all of their extraneous clinical trial activity. So it really does depend on the kind of business that you're in. And I know that a lot of companies in the manufacturing sector have really had to scramble hard to figure out how to keep their employees safe and still be able to produce product.
Okay. Well, I think we are at our time. And before I turn it back over to John, I think John's got a couple things that he wanted to share. I just wanted to thank John, thank HBS Club for inviting us to chat with the group. I do want to thank Andrew, for being part of the panel, and I do just want to share that if this has sparked an interest, right, in the early stage ecosystem, and you want to learn more, we do have, as John knows, a lot of regular programming. Our programming's continued right into the virtual environment. We have a number of events coming up that are open to members and non-members. And we can share that information with John, or you can reach out to any of the panelists, or if you want to indicate in chat that you'd like to learn about upcoming events, we can follow up with you that way. So a number of different ways, but the events, just to give you a high level of what's coming up, we've got a Venture Flicks series that's sponsored by KeyBank, and it's a 3-part series that focuses on different tech and entrepreneurship focused documentary screenings, and then they're followed by panel discussions. So we have Something Ventured will be screened on October 15th, and Code Girl will be screened on November 5th. And then we also run an Investor Insights series sponsored by PNC. This is I think the 4th event in that series that we're coming up on, and it's going to be a panel discussion focused on investing in innovation and tech trends. So it'll be a panel discussion of a group of people who really sit at that intersection of corporate innovation and VC. That's on Tuesday, October 28th. And finally, we have our member meeting, which is usually a member-only event. But if people want to get a better sense of kind of how we do this activity, that next event is on November 18th, and people, we'll allow guests to come and see. It's usually updates from our portfolio companies like Andrew, or if we have new investment decisions that we're coming up against, we have companies presenting for that. So with that, I'll wrap, John, and I'll turn it back over to you. But thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Daniel, and thanks, guys. I mean, that was really terrific and very informative. And I guess, just in wrapping up, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've found my association with this group to be really rewarding and educational. And I really appreciate you guys coming and sharing your information with the rest of the members. And to all the members that are on the phone, if you guys would like more information or you have questions, feel free to contact me, and I'll keep you informed of upcoming events and so on, because it really is a neat group and a neat group of people. They mentioned the 300 members in the North Coast family, and it's a great group to get to know. So let me know if you'd like more information. So again, thanks, guys, and really appreciate it. Great work.
Thank you.
So, yep.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Just a couple of comments before we get off. Just we also have a lot more events throughout the fall. Our next event is the Global Networking Night, which for Harvard alums only, and that features beer. So enough said about that. I'm sure that'll be a great event, and everybody will want to be on that one. We've got on the 28th, Mark DeLuzio, President and CEO of Lean Horizons Consulting. And then we've got two really interesting events on 11/5. Carrie Jarros, CEO of Gojo, talking about what's been going on with their company, which obviously, has been on the side of doing rather well in the whole pandemic thing, and has had to cope with, their business growing really rapidly. So that'll be really interesting. And then Tom Mihailovic, CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, on November 10th. So, again, a great schedule, and hope everybody will join us for those. So thanks to everybody that signed on, and thanks again to the North Coast family, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right.